Welcome to another episode of Stewart Squared, wherein me and my father either go back into history and understand today through the lens of history, particularly this AI revolution and how it relates to personal computing, the rise of the internet, and the mobile revolutions. And today we are going to be talking about Oracle because I gave a presentation at our AI Whispers on Wednesday about Elon Musk's failed deal with Oracle. And then I was wondering, like, why does Oracle have a cloud computing? I mean, I knew that they were in cloud computing, but why were they the ones who are offering to rent out GPUs to both Microsoft and Elon Musk's XAI? And so that now I want to understand the history of it. I want to understand because I've heard of Oracle, I've heard of Larry Ellison. I remember the big building in Redwood Shores, the big beautiful glass building that was so. And I remember there was a water
Five
park
of
that five of them.
five of
That's right. Yeah, there's a campus. That's right. And there's a water park. I have vague memories of a water park that you
I
guys
took the
took us
place of
to.
that.
Oh, that's
They
funny.
they bought that land and the water park moved over to on the other side of the bay. I can't
That's
remember
right.
his
Yeah. So Vallejo, or somewhere around there. Yeah, but I remember that. So what did Oracle first start doing?
So there's a lot of history here. And I'm going to take a little bit of a detour. Um, I'm fascinated by the fact that Skydance is buying Paramount
Ooh.
and which is one of the legacy studios and among other things. And Skydance is a company started by Larry Ellison's son, David Ellison. And David Ellison is, I think he's your age, like 41. Um, the I have to look at that text, but let me keep going while I'm doing that. The um, David Ellison grew up when Larry Ellison and Steve Jobs were best friends. And so David Ellison's growing up, it's pretty consistent timing with yours. Um,
Yeah.
Listening to Steve and Larry talk to each other. And as he got to be a teenager, Steve gave him advice about what was important. And uh, and so he's wandered through several things, but he ended up starting this company called Skydance, which is a production company um, that makes movies and TV series, I think. And they've been around for 10 years and they just raised money at a $4 billion valuation, which is really pretty unusual for a movie company. But the thing that David Ellison has is he understands how technology works, and yet he's a Hollywood mogul. And
Mm.
Paramount is this legacy studio that's really never understood what happened, right? They're just sitting there going like, what's this streaming thing? What's going on? And what happened to all the movie theaters? And so he's now going to run this Paramount. And it's like, it's the most interesting marriage of Silicon Valley and Hollywood. Um, so,
Uh,
so he grew up with Larry Ellison, and Larry Ellison is the co-founder of Oracle. Oracle was started in got to be like 19, I don't know when it was started. That's easy to look up, but the like 1985, something like that. Um, and it was started as an enterprise software company, um, a modern enterprise software company. And so there are companies before Oracle, which actually don't exist anymore. In fact, a little bit of a twist here is Oracle was a competitor to Progress Software, your old Joe's company. And Progress went one way and Oracle went another way. Oracle started as a database company for enterprises and um, dealing with very fundamental issues of how you maintain a database online. Um, and previously, databases had been this kind of you'd feed data into it and you'd wait for it to munch on it, and it's called batch processing. And Oracle is really the first, not real time, but online database that was available all the time. And I'm sorry I know this kind of stuff, but Oracle did what's called two-phase commit. So if you create a piece of data and you put it in a database, because the time it takes to get from the entry point to being in the database, things change. And so you have to have a way of actually making sure that the data is what you put in and that it's consistent with all the other data. And that's called two-phase commit. The first phase is you enter it, and the second phase is you validate it. And Oracle did this. Now there's a whole history around Oracle because Larry Ellison, he is an engineer, but it was his co-founder, something Miner, Miner, who left Oracle and ended up going into the wine business and makes a really good unfiltered Chardonnay. And so Larry ended up being a sole founder because his co-founder left, couldn't handle dealing. And for a long time, Oracle was not trusted. And Larry would stand up and make promises, a little bit of it like Elon Musk type character, except he only did one company. But he'd stand up and he'd promise a product and it wouldn't show up until much later. And everybody thought of him as like a super salesman. And I mean, this is going into the kind of core event that Oracle went through. He, in fact, did that. He stood up and started announcing increases in revenue that were based on false records. And like in 1993, I won't have the year right, but early in the 90s, they were already public, and they'd been public for several years, and they're a much smaller company. And the auditors figured it out, and Oracle had to admit that they had been reporting revenue that didn't exist. And the reason this happened is because Larry Ellison just beat the crap out of his salespeople, and he set targets for them that they couldn't meet. And so they'd start making up sales in order to meet the quota. And it really screwed up the company. And usually when a public company announces that it had to restate its revenue, it usually loses all credibility. And so Larry Ellison did the one thing, the only thing he could do to solve that problem, which is he fired himself as CEO and hired a new one. And that new CEO was CEO for 10 years and professional historical, set up the sales system, engineering, the whole thing, turn it into a real company. And Larry Ellison, meanwhile, I think he was called CTO, something like that, and worked for him. And he did that voluntarily, so it's all credit to him that he figured this out. But he spent 10 years watching him, figured out what he was doing, and then fired him. And now that guy's name is Ray Lane, and he's very wealthy. And as a result, because he took Oracle through this crisis where his stock price went up tremendously. And then Larry Ellison's been CEO ever since. That transition from founder to a hired CEO, if it happens, is usually means the end of the founder, but not with Larry Ellison. So anyway, Oracle is now a broad spectrum enterprise software company. It does databases, it does applications, it does all of the different components. And so it rules, right? So what's interesting is watching Oracle try to surf all the changes that have happened in between, including the personal computer, because its original stuff ran on mini computers and mainframes.
Whoa.
And it's done that, and partially because Larry Ellison and Steve Jobs were best friends, and they hung out with each other all the time. Steve was on Larry's board, Larry was on Steve's board, which he eventually had to get off of because of conflicts of interest. So Larry learned a lot about personal computers and personal technology from Steve. Steve learned a lot about enterprise software, but he didn't really care about it. And including about creativity, because Steve also ran Pixar at the same time. And so when you hear David Ellison talk, and he just did an interview about the acquisition of Paramount, he refers back to Steve talking about Pixar and Apple and how technology and creativity merge with each other. And so it's like it's all of a piece. It's like this is an incredible Silicon Valley story because Oracle, of course, was in Redwood Shores, as you saw. It was somewhere else before, and Apple was in Cupertino, and I mean it's a lockstep. So now there's a next generation with David Ellison, in particular. Steve's kids haven't gone that way. The ruling Hollywood. It's like the ultimate takeover. Not to
So
mention
there,
there's an Apple and Amazon, but yeah.
so there's so many questions. I mean, the database stuff that you're just talking about, like why are they so complex? But I think it's way more interesting to go into Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison because they seem like, from my understanding, Steve is like this hippie bohemian guy who's all kind of love and stuff, but he's also ambitious. So there's these sort of themes of spirituality and hippie, and Larry Ellison seems the complete opposite, like just shark, total shark. And so that relationship, the fact that they're friends, is like counterintuitive. But
Yep.
yeah,
It
can you go more
was.
into that?
People couldn't
Yeah.
figure that out. Why the hell was Steve hanging out with Larry? Or vice versa. But they're both, it's probably not fair to say, but they're both megalomaniacs. Both are
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
um,
Narcissists. They're narcissists,
narcissism,
basically. Yeah,
whatever it is, it's, in
yeah,
my mind, it's a measure of how much people worry about what other people think. Neither Larry nor Steve were worried about what other people think. And I think they bonded because they were the two people who did not give a shit what anybody else thought. And so they were operating on a completely different level than the rest of us. And so I think they bonded over business and personal life. And, Larry Ellison's personal life was a disaster. Steve's was actually very stable and
yes.
married a
Interesting.
nice lady and had raised his kids, kept them out of the limelight. And Laureen Powell Jobs is herself very powerful. But but Larry was not good at his personal life.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, there's this theme of sort of integrity, and it feels like Steve Jobs was of this integrity, and it doesn't feel like Larry Ellison is much of integrity. But
Yeah, but
well, let's yeah,
that
go for it.
anecdote I told you about him firing himself, at some level he had incredible integrity because he applied it to himself, right? He treated himself the same way he treated everybody else. Like I think of it in my mind as
Oh,
Larry
interesting.
Ellison rolls into the bathroom after a sleepless night, trying to figure out what to do with Oracle after this disaster, and looks in the mirror and goes, "Holy crap, you're the problem, you asshole." He's
Yeah.
looking in the mirror, calling himself, that is I've never seen that before. Never seen a founder actually identify himself as the problem and then fix it.
Yeah, and this goes into sort of the nature of reality because it's impossible we're so complex and we're so complicated as human beings that we sometimes transcend our own images, and it's impossible to put us into boxes and say that was this person was that way, and even now, like even in history or even today, it's very difficult. Um, and that's a sort of philosophical question, but I want to go into how Oracle got into AI. How did it go? So I'll give a recap of what I learned about Musk, Oracle, and Microsoft. Musk is trying to get his hands on GPUs because now he spent $40 billion on a social media network, and he's also got Neuralink, and he's trying to combine those things. And AI is the missing piece, and he doesn't want to be dependent on anyone else. And so he was talking with Oracle about building this server farm, and we're going to build this data center that's going to have a bunch of GPUs, and he's going to rent them from Oracle. And then, of course, Musk wanted it done in half the time, and Oracle is like, no, we can't do that. And so Musk then says, okay, screw it, we'll do it on our own. And so he's now talking to NVIDIA about buying not renting, but buying the data chips and creating his own server. Super interesting, super ambitious, but also can he do it? And also that may be a business risk because some of the intuitions I'm getting are that the efficiency of GPUs might actually change. Their power draw might actually change. And we might be able to do them on CPUs as Numenta is trying to do, which may take a long time. And I'm not saying, but the fundamental thing is that this architecture, this infrastructure that they're spending billions and billions of dollars might go the same way that Beta went in VHS versus
Uh,
Beta.
yeah, no, that's a reference that I actually happened before I started getting into this, but the VHS and beta were decided in like the 70s. The God, there's a lot there. Um, First of all, the better comparison for Oracle or a Musk actually is Son. The fuck's his
Uh-huh.
first name?
Uh-huh.
Uh, Masayoshi Son, who is the founder, chief executive, billionaire mogul of SoftBank Japan. And SoftBank's name was actually the name of an American company. He ended up turning the Japanese version of that company into, you know, a huge enterprise by taking risk. He bought, um, was it Yahoo Japan, or I can't remember how he got to SoftBank, but um, he ended up starting and building a telecoms company based on distributed technology. And it was brilliant because now SoftBank is like the biggest telecom company, bigger than NTT, which is the sort of government monopoly. And Nippon Telephone and Telegraph is what NTT stands for. And the uh, the AT&T equivalent in Japan. Um,
Uh-huh.
so he now has, this huge corporation and this vision fund, the SoftBank Vision Fund, where he invests 10 times as much as anybody else in any one company, and makes big bets. He's all about risk. It's what he does. um, so he's got the same problem um, Elon Musk has, which is he wants to do AI like everybody wants to do AI, and
Uh-huh.
he's going like, screw this. He bought a semiconductor company. He bought ARM,
Whoa.
which stood for Advanced Research Machines. But ARM is the common architecture across virtually everything now except NVIDIA. Um,
Mm.
it's the common architecture for microprocessors that Apple, Amazon built service for their cloud operations, but basically all computing except for AI, because AI is modeled off of graphics processing units, which were used to make video games go fast. And so Sunsan's uh, reaction to this is, well, let's see, let's take ARM public. Let's use that cash to build our own GPUs for AI, and we'll
Whoa.
make them better than NVIDIA, so they'll go faster and cheaper.
Whoa.
Um, So, you have to kind of step back and see the bigger perspective in order to kind of understand how all this stuff fits together. Sunshine can't buy NVIDIA chips any better than anybody else, right? So his solution is to go do it himself. Um, the fact that Elon can't get around NVIDIA must be something that just irritates the crap out of him
Yeah.
because, he can't. He doesn't have the money. He got like 6 companies already. He can't go start a semiconductor company and do fast enough to beat NVIDIA at its own game, which is what Sunset's doing. And so he turned to Oracle, and Oracle was a kind of a oddball choice because they're an enterprise software company and their business is serving big companies. And so, being a reasonably smart company, they had been stockpiling NVIDIA chips before AI, before OpenAI turned this into a race. And they already had the resources to be able to rent out servers. Um, and so Elon Musk turned to Oracle. And but they're not going, you've got this part right. They're not going as fast as he wants to go. So he's going to NVIDIA directly and offering a different deal and willing to spend a lot of money on it. And shoot, he bought Twitter for $40 million, $40 billion, $44 billion.
Yeah.
And it's all money to him. He doesn't really care.
Yeah.
He's been nearly bankrupt multiple times during his career. Um, so I don't know how he can get any leverage over NVIDIA because NVIDIA makes so much money and
Uh,
it's worth so much. Right now, they don't really care about, it'd be nickel and diming them to say, well, I'll buy it instead of rent it. Um, Actually, everybody buys the NVIDIA chipset, so I'm not sure exactly where the leverage is that he would get NVIDIA to sell them enough that, but Microsoft buys them and Oracle buys them. It's not leased. It's the people that buy the NVIDIA chips are
yeah.
renting the servers uh,
W-
on a Yeah.
Yeah, that's the part that is really difficult for me to untangle because then I went so Oracle turned around and said, okay, well, we're not doing it with Elon Musk, let's do it with Microsoft. And so now they're going to rent Microsoft NVIDIA chips for $5 billion
They're not running
over
the
two
chips. That's
years.
the key thing. Don't think about running the chips. What they're doing is they're renting the space in their own cloud. Unless I'm wrong.
Oh, got it. Yeah, 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 yeah. So they're
That's
yeah.
what Oracle does for a living, right? They basically rent storage, applications, database services, all this stuff. That's what they've been doing for 50 years now. Um, and so that's a natural act for them. I mean, Oracle, I'm sure that Microsoft already buys services from them, even though Microsoft has its own server architecture and enterprise applications.
Mm.
And it becomes fungible, right? Like Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Oracle, they're all sitting out there doing this stuff for big companies. Google's been relatively less successful at it. Amazon's been extraordinarily successful at it. Microsoft is pretty successful at it. And Oracle's been in the background kind of doing its own thing. Um, and that's a little bit of Oracle trying to step out and get in the limelight. Just like
Do
they
you,
were promising to run the TikTok infrastructure to make it American instead of Chinese.
do you think that this, oh man, I lost the question. So Amazon, let's talk about Amazon. Amazon seems to be sitting there quietly. I mean, they're all sitting there quietly because, like, well, it may be a function of or a media environment too, is that sort of unless you know the people who talk about these arcane details, you're just never going to get them brought to you by the algorithms that you have to go and search for these things. And so now I figured out how to search for these things, but they're all kind of quiet. They're all doing their own things. And Amazon has this beautiful infrastructure, the AWS infrastructure. And do you know much about their AI plans? Like what are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, I have to throw them all in there.
Yeah.
Microsoft, um, Amazon, Oracle, and Apple. Well, Apple's
Yes.
chosen a
Yeah.
different path, and it's really interesting because
Yeah.
it's sort of risky, but it's also makes a lot of sense because it's just different than anybody else. Um, Oracle, I mean, Amazon, all these companies have been doing AI for decades, but
Yeah.
none of them are like taken by surprise. The only thing that took them by surprise is that OpenAI did this thing, and suddenly everybody's into it. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
wait a minute, we've been doing this for decades. Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened to Google. Is they're going along, going they're way ahead of everybody else, and then suddenly OpenAI shows up, and they're like, wait a minute, we've been doing this for decades. Um, and they've all been doing it quietly. So you can't. This is where the media thing comes in. You can't. The media knows about what's visible, right? Not about what's not visible.
Yeah.
And so you can't take the media's assessment of these companies' capabilities. So the media goes like, well, Apple's way behind because they haven't talked about it. But Apple never talks about anything until they got it. In fact, it was a little early for them to talk about it this year. Um, and Amazon, they go like Amazon's way behind because they're not talking about it and like nobody knows. So each of them have a strategy that's very consistent with the personality of the company and the history of the company, including Oracle. The one that really stepped out was Microsoft when they did the deal with
Yeah.
OpenAI, put whatever it was, $14 billion into the company. And they had plenty of cash. It wasn't a big deal for them. It's like a little pipsqueak. It's a rounding error. And but that Satya Nadella said, wow, we really need to take a different thing because Microsoft's AI research had actually not been that good. Um,
Mm.
and and bring OpenAI in to make everybody think that we're on top of it. And that worked. That was like, and it was Sam Altman and Satya Nadella going, shaking hands and doing a deal that helped each other. Um, the machinations are just, I mean, the media loves reporting on the machinations, but most of them are completely irrelevant. And so Amazon's strategy is based on the fact that when you go into AWS, Amazon Web Services, it started with actually storage, database, and compute, which is, the
Mm.
server farm
Yeah.
being able to calculate things really fast. But they added a bunch of other services, database services, and so they built out an entire ecosystem that's actually a mirror, pretty much, of Oracle. No, it's not the same specific things because
Yeah, interesting.
serving internet companies much more than they're serving enterprises. But and they've been working on AI, and they have devices, right, like the Kindle and the Fire Stick and a bunch of other stuff. So they have a significant hardware business as well. And they build their own servers. Right? They design their own chip based on the ARM architecture. Can't remember what the name of it is, but they built their own servers. So their servers are very high performance. They're really kind of really good at this, right? That's why AWS is doing so well. And so they've been working on AI. So they observe this whole thing and they go, well, we're not going to play that game, right? We're not going to play Microsoft's game.
Mm.
We're going to play our own game. And our own game is that we're going to offer anybody access to any LLM, right? They'll rent LLMs to you, right? Yeah, that's what AWS ever did, right? They do services. And so now they have AI services. And everybody goes, oh, well, that's just like, they're just like using everybody else's technology. So they don't have any technology.
Yeah,
Not
but
true.
this is actually the question I forgot, is that the OpenAI, Anthropic, and I've found out something very interesting, that Anthropic, it relies totally on AWS. They have not trained
Part of why
foundational
Amazon
models.
put, what did they put, like 2 or 3 billion into
Oh, that's
Anthropic?
right. That's right. Okay, that's right. But these models, once trained, I can download them on my computer and has no connection to the foundational models,
Yeah,
except the bleeding edge.
some of them are too big for even desktop computers,
Yeah.
but that's where Apple's strategy come in.
Mm.
Apple's going to install small LLMs on your device in the next version of the operating. Well, it might not happen until next year,
Mm.
but you're going to have a little LLM, excuse me, an SLLM, maybe a small LLM. You'll have several of them actually on your phone, because these phones are, I mean, they're as powerful. They're far more powerful than any computers they previously came,
Yeah.
as mainframes or mini computers or even as desktop computers. An incredible amount of power in that device, and and that's very interesting because that's the connection to Numenta. This is all based on having a CPU that's incredibly powerful. It's also a stack of chips and a bunch of other stuff. But um, so Apple's going to put little LLMs on your phone, and which would only do so much. So then they did the deal with OpenAI, so that if it can't figure out how to answer the question based on your personal data, then it will go out to the internet and get
Yeah, I got
ChatGPT.
it. Interesting.
So, I mean, these architectures are all really interesting. And so there's a huge bets being made right now about how this is going to work out ultimately. And just like when IBM introduced the PC in 1983, or,
Mm.
the first personal computer companies hadn't gotten to the point of thinking strategically about it. But this is like, these are all these big behemoths are all worth, hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars, trying to figure out how this is going to work in the future. And they're all placing bets, and every bet is different. And that's why it's so interesting. To me, that's why it's so interesting. I don't really understand how the GPU, munges all this data and produces an LLM. I kind of get it, but I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah. It's
But
it's crazy. But so, in the energy efficiency thing is really interesting, because I had a great interview with this company, Valor Atomics, who's building nuclear power, or wants to build nuclear powered plants in order to create synthetic hydrocarbons. Very ambitious. But we talked about AI power centers, and he was like, but the efficiency for these things can change, and they are changing. The next generation
will
that,
will change. Absolutely, you
yeah,
can rely on that.
yeah, yeah. So, well, like, they're investing these billions. Okay, yeah, and they're investing these billions of dollars into these foundational models. The foundational models seem to have no clear pathway from, I generate this foundational money, I get into an enterprise, I make money from the enterprise, because there's this step in between that I don't think anybody else gets. Is this technology is augmentation. It's augmenting me. So if it's not augmenting the enterprise, it's augmenting the humans within the enterprise. It's in slavery, we can't really own humans. You can invest in humans, but there's a disconnect between the foundational model and the value that these things are creating. And
Well,
so then,
that's why Apple's strategy
yeah,
is so interesting, because they're
yeah,
only interested in you.
yeah,
They have no interest in the
yeah,
enterprise.
yeah.
Um, they actually operate very well as an enterprise themselves. They have remarkable systems technologies that they use to operate the company, but including like real-time systems for supply chain and inventory management, stuff like
Whoa.
that.
Wait, so
Um,
that's okay. Well, that's it. We'll put a pin in that because
that's
yeah,
a little sidetrack,
yeah,
but
yeah,
that's the distinguishing feature of Apple.
yeah,
It's what's
yeah,
so interesting. Um, and uh, so um, where Numenta comes into this that I find really interesting is that I think the game is going to change again.
yeah,
So right now, LLMs are huge batch processes, right? You collect as much data as you can. In fact, you make it up, you create synthetic data. You're sitting here going on this journey to create this huge batch process, and out pops a better LLM. And a better LLM knows more, and it can be kind of
yeah,
more intuitive, but it's still a batch process, right? You still have to
yeah.
go munge all the data for X amount of time and then pop it out. And there's kind of an asymptote to that. I think I'm using that word correctly, which is that everybody's got a bunch of NVIDIA chips and is using a lot of power, and everybody's doing the same basic thing, right? Yeah, the result doesn't end up being different. So I think somebody has to change the game. And I don't know if it will be Numenta because they've been undercover for too long
Mm,
and probably not really motivated to get commercial about it. But
mm,
at some point, it is going to mimic the brain, right? This has to be a
mm.
real-time system, not a batch system. And so, and somebody's going to figure that out. Um, and then, maybe Apple will figure it out because they're focused on doing it on the phone and using the big LLMs as an adjunct, or, maybe it'll come out of the left field, which happens all the time and in technology. And so I think the need for power is going to go away.
Yeah.
The amount of electricity it drives, if it's real time. I mean, that's part of what the guy at Dementa said is it only takes what
20
eight
watts.
tenths of a watt to operate the human brain. Um,
Yep.
and but there's several billion of us, and collectively we can make things happen. So maybe there's a highly distributed architecture where you get a button anyway. I don't know
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
how it
yeah,
works.
yeah,
It
yeah.
will work in the future, but there's another step. And right now people are, so this is why that guy who wrote this paper, this 180,000 word paper about how San Francisco is the epicenter of AI,
Yeah,
and there's only
yeah,
about 300 people that know what they're doing. I think all those people are like focused on the wrong problem.
yeah,
And somebody is sitting there working on solving that problem. And we know that Numenta is one of them, but someone else is out there who's wanting to build a big company. So I think so. This whole focus on the amount of power it takes to munge these LLMs, I think it's appropriate because it's going to keep going for a while. And uh, so nuclear power, that's actually a consideration as well. But people are so scared of nuclear that it's probably not going to happen fast enough to solve that problem.
mm,
I just saw a deal. I can't name the company because I saw it.
mm.
Who wants to put nuclear power devices in space to
Yes.
create uh, data server farms,
Oh God.
because it's
Uh,
weightless, and you
yeah,
can solar power directly
yeah,
from the sun. It's a really interesting idea. Um, Lord knows how they're going to raise the money to do it, but
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, well, this gets into question. I mean, there's a philosophical question that I've not forgotten. So, but then there's another question of like the amount of capital. So how would you? Because I'm starting to interview all these companies because I just find them so fascinating. Which like these people who are doing things in space and but then from an investment angle, like these things can take way longer than 10 years because it's not like going on. Yeah, it's just like total madness in terms of the investment thing of like how that works out.
so we have that problem ourselves right now.
Yeah.
We have an interest in and a practice in investing in hard technology companies. So I have companies in my portfolio that are like 12 years old, and my investors would like to see liquidity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so the whole venture capital model is based on a 10-year investment cycle. Um, and if you're making money, your
Yeah.
investors will tolerate a longer payout. But if you're not making money, and right now very few venture capitalists are actually making any money, contributing
Mm,
money to their investors. So there's incredible pressure right now, and what's happening is the the small and medium-sized venture firms are getting squeezed because the big sources of capital, big pension funds and
Have all shut
institutions
off.
write big checks. So they write them to, Andreessen Horowitz and other people that are raising billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar funds. And those venture capitalists have to find a place to put it. Well, where are you going to put it? But right now in AI. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
there's an open question about how the venture model evolves over time. Is it now just large venture capital firms and nobody else, or a few little ones sneaking around?
Why
But
the institutional investors, why is it deemed less risky to put it into something like Andreessen Horowitz? Is that why they're doing it?
no, they can write a big check. So when
Oh,
Andreessen Horowitz raises a fund for $3 billion, they have to go find checks. Well, you don't find them a million at a time, or even 100
yeah,
billion.
yeah, yeah. Got it, got it.
People to write checks that are like 500 or 600 million at a time. And the only people that write checks, like, it's not writing checks, but that commit
Yep.
that kind of capital are the big pension funds.
Mm.
Washington State, California, New York retirement program, both teachers and public employees, Texas, these big states that have these huge pension funds. So they still only put like 5 or 10% of their total assets into these big checks, but that's how the system works now. It's like it's systemic. And the original idea of venture capitalists to, a few rich people making bets on hot technology, but high risk
Yeah,
technologies
yeah,
back
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
in the 70s.
interesting.
That's gone away.
And it doesn't seem like there's any other systemic thing that could take its place. Like it feels
Oh
like
no,
a total.
it'll evolve again. I mean, that particularly the American economy, because it's capitalist and government can't really get its arms around it. It's very dynamic. It's it'll show up in a different form, and maybe, I don't know. I can't speculate. This is above my pay grade in turn when it gets
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
macroeconomics.
yeah. Interesting. And it also seems so interesting that the whole thing that started this is the unions, the funds for the way, if I'm correct, because the unions would require the pensions. It's all the people who are working for as teachers who are expecting a payout when they're younger later, which I was imagine was negotiated by the union. And it's funny because the whole reason the chip manufacturing has a large part to left Silicon Valley has a large part to do with the fact that the unions demanded certain things that Taiwanese didn't.
You can't really single out
Yeah.
the
Okay.
union. The
Yeah.
unions are part of the economic system. Um, so how capital moves and how large companies manage their resources and how labor unions interact with that, it's all part of the system. You go to other countries and our system doesn't really exist anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of closest is like Australia is pretty close because they have a similar history to ours
Mm,
in some ways. And uh, Israeli system is
mm.
somewhat like ours, but there's no two systems that are the same, right? Even China and Russia are very different from the other end of the spectrum. So I mean, that's what I say. Get up into macroeconomics, and then my brain
Yeah.
starts to dribble out of my ears. It's like I can think about little pieces of it, but the entire thing.
Yeah.
So I listen to Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein's podcast is fascinating because he does deal with stuff at this level, and uh, and he's both smart and curious, and he goes and, I mean, it's not unlike what you do, but he goes and finds
Yeah.
the smartest person he can find to talk about something he doesn't totally understand and gets them to explain it, and then he asks some really good
Mm,
questions.
mm.
But it's at this level. It's like, how macroeconomics work and how the political. I mean, he's the first one that did a podcast back in February about how would you avoid Biden, and he went and talked to an expert on political conventions, and they drew out the history of political conventions and how it all changed and why we're stuck in this place where we have two old guys who nobody likes. I
Yeah.
mean, nobody likes either one of them.
This is the I'll end with this short story that was really funny. I love Argentina. I go to my coffee shop every morning, and it's all jokes. They're all making jokes. The way to win all the social games here in Argentina is to make the best jokes. And so I go downstairs and they're joking around with me. They're telling me new slang that I need to learn in Spanish and stuff. And so then one asks me, "Well, what happened last night?" And I was like, oh, no comment. And I'm referring to the fact that, you know, the assassination attempt in Trump and such. And it's like, they asked me, well, who do you believe? Who do you vote for? And I was like, neither. And then they're like, oh, that's why you're down here, isn't it? And I was like, oh, exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why
Put
I'm
that
here.
together, yeah.
Yeah. Which is, Argentina is very famous for that. They've done that for everyone.
Well, I
Everyone
mean,
was. Yeah.
there's a huge social experiment going on in
Yeah.
Argentina right now, which
Yeah.
is fascinating. Everybody's paying attention to it because if Milei can pull off what he's trying to do, Argentina will be a functionally different country than it has been for the last 50 years.
Yeah. Pretty exciting, but I know you got a plane to catch. So thank you so much. That was really fun. Any new articles you got popping in your brain?
No, I've been fishing, doing other stuff. So
Cool.
no new thoughts in the last 4 days.